we're gonna see how the deep helps us with data collection, and yeah, how it can make this process smoother for the person in charge of it. Then we're gonna see how we structure our data. That goes from, well, the creation of frameworks, the tagging, and we're gonna see how that process of tagging has moved in three steps, from manual to assisted to automatic. We're going to see the assessment registry. I know it's a very niched tool. It's used in any humanitarian response, and Deep has a great engine and great feature for that. Then we're going to see how we can visualize our data, how we can play with it, filter it. We're going to see the dashboards, and in case we don't want to visualize data in the platform, we're gonna see how we can export our entries. We're gonna see the different formats for that. And then at the end, we're gonna show you the analysis module, which I believe is it's the richest in NLP features, and how Deep can help us automate our analysis. As I said, it must not be the last step in our analysis, but the first one. But it saves a lot of time, and well, we're gonna see how it works. Within the analysis module, there is also a reporting module, and we'll see how, if you desire, or if you want to, you can publish directly a report from the platform. I'm gonna stop before moving into the platform in case there are any questions, and again, there are no bad questions, and I'm not sure if anyone is still not clear about what Deep is, but we're gonna move into the demo now. If there is no well, sorry, I'm trying to close the presentation. So we're gonna move into the platform, and if there is any urgent question or questions that my colleagues feel should definitely be replied before continuing, please let me know. Otherwise, we're gonna get here. Okay. So the first thing you see when you type the Deep on in Google or in your searching engines, you're gonna see our page, the deep.io, and you're gonna, well, have plenty of information here. You have resources, you have training resources, you have plenty of materials in case you want to train your teams on Deep. We have the Learning Hub with Kaya courses. You can introduce or start using Deep by clicking or using those Kaya courses. Kaya is part of the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, so we have 2 self-directed and quite comprehensive courses on the Deep. You have the YouTube channel, etc. However, this is not the app or the platform itself. That we will access that by clicking here, access the Deep. And here, this is what you find. You can register either with your email or with your, well, institutional or personal. We always encourage you to use your institutional emails in case you want to take part of other people's projects, or you want to work more collaboratively. It's much more likely that you get accepted into a project if you use those institutional emails. You have your terms on privacy in case you're concerned about how your data is used, where it's stored, who owns it, etc. And in case you still have questions, you can always contact us, and we'll try to solve those problems. In case you're curious before registering, you say, I'm not pretty sure yet, I want to log in or to register, you can explore a bit of what's out there in the data, in the Deep. So you can see what are the existing projects. However, as I said, those projects, you can only see them from the outside. You can see the names or the titles of the projects. You can see very basic details of them, but that would be all. The frameworks that are most used, what are the main sources, etc. But yeah, here, without registering, you can see this. You cannot access any data, but it's something. If you decide to register, I'm gonna bypass that process, but then you log in. And this is what you would find when you log into the Deep. your screen for sure is going to be very much simpler than mine. Why? Because I'm taking part in many projects. But basically here is our main dashboard or main page. Now we're going to explain what we can do from the very early stage on the DIP. And we're going to start by one of, I would say there are 4 user profiles in the DIP. One of them is the creator or the admin of a project. That person that, decides what are the analytical questions, what is the framework that we're going to use, what type of analysis we want to get out of this project. So it's like the creator of it. And then we have a second one that is what we call the secondary data review officer, or the analyst that it's someone that logs into DIP every day or periodically. They do data collection, they do the tagging, they clean the data, they do some quality control, they do exports, and basically, they interact with the platform daily. Then we have the analyst that can be or doesn't necessarily need to be the same person as the secondary data review officer. That is the person that performs the analysis. Data is prepared for them, is tagged, is packed in a way, and then they do the analysis. But also we have a 4th profile that is someone who doesn't necessarily need to know how to create a project or a framework or even tag, who just consumes DIP. We could call it, they just benefit from it. So they just log in, they check on the dashboard, they might do an export, look for some key documents, and then leave. So those are, I would say, the profiles. Now we're going to start with that first person, the admin of the project. And what does this person need to do or can do? Well, first of all, set up a project. When we set up project, we click here. Okay, I'm going to save a bit of time and then take one that is already pre-filled in. But basically, here is where we decide basically a description of our project. What are the different stakeholders that take place in here? So we might look for our organization and then drop it here. And here on this right side of the screen, we have a few buttons that are relevant in terms of especially data protection and privacy. By default, all projects in DIP are visible, okay, public. That, please do not understand that as your data not being safe or being open to others. The project being visible just means that if you get to the dashboard that we saw before, if someone looks, for example, for a project focused on Spain, where I'm from, they will just see the metadata of the project, and then they would be able to at least request to join. However, we acknowledge that sometimes not only your data needs to be safe, but sometimes just the existence or the existence of a project is a risk for the people taking part in it. We can think about volatile environments, countries suffering complex crises on which, for example, working on certain topics or sectors might be a risk for people. So then you can ask for the project to be private. Then the DIP team will grant that access. Okay, that is on the project visibility. Here you need to be you need to decide whether you want public documents added into your project to be accessed if you end up creating an export. What does it mean? By default, again, no one will be able to access your projects or the data on them. However, sometimes we might create exports. We're going to see later how those exports look like. Those exports might have links to the original documents. If you allow this, then people might be able to access it. However, by default, as you see, we'll have everything not shared, and then you decide to share or not later. I'm not gonna go more in depth into that, but here is where we decide geo areas, which countries we're gonna cover into our project. We can either use the geo areas available here and in the map, so we can select the shapes that DIP has by default, usually up to date from HDX, or you can update your own shapes. It's up to you to do such thing. You do not need to stick to just one country. So traditionally DIP was used for specific countries. However, if you work, for example, on a team that analyzes protection across several countries, we encourage you to do that type of analysis. And here on the users, here is where I always encourage people to be very, well, not careful, but to manage the users of your projects in detail. Why? Because we can ensure a collaborative environment while still restricting access to other people. How will we do it? For example, if we think about, let's say, the response, we can talk about actual examples. So, for example, last year, Hurricane Beryl response in the Caribbean, then we create a project on it. Then we allow a lot of users that are taking part of that response to be part of the project. However, at some point, some of my colleagues might say, hey, we just added here a preliminary report on protection. And yeah, we don't mind that our colleagues from the Red Cross and OCHA have a look at those documents. But yeah, we do not want every, for example, local organization that is part of this project to read those. By how we can restrict access? Well, we can say, okay, this person is going to be just a reader of non-confidential data. So everything that is confidential it's not that they will not be able to access it or click it on it or open. They will not even be aware of those documents being in the projects. So by doing this, what we allow is, yeah, we still have a collaborative environment. We can have 50, 60 people taking part in our project, but some of them might only read, some of them might only read non-confidential documents. Some of them might be able to tag or to do exports or to analyze. Okay, so here, this screen is key for ensuring a collaborative environment while still ensuring data protection. And here is where we create our framework. This is the key step when creating a project. We have two options, as I said. One of them, actually, it could be even three. So one of them is we create our framework from scratch, okay? If you have clarity on how to create it, just you go into the building module and you create it according to, well, to your knowledge or to your methodology. Then we have a second option, that is that we take someone's framework and we use it. As I said, Deep promotes knowledge sharing, and yeah, the way you create or you structure your data is also part of its knowledge. So you can look for anyone's framework and use it, or you can say, okay, I'm going to use someone's framework as an initial step. So I'm going to say, okay, I like this framework, but I think I'm going to make some context-specific variations of it. So you can clone it, and then from then you'll be able to edit it. For creating frameworks in Deep, we always encourage to reach out to us, and then we'll try to help you with that. It's not that we do it very well, but yeah, I've done it wrongly many times, and yeah, it's easier if you do it with us. Also, depending on how well built your framework is, your SDR and your analysis process will be more successful or less. So as I said, we can create a framework here, select it from someone, create it from scratch, or clone someone's framework and then do some adaptations. And here is the last step that we can do as a project creator. And it's the link between the project admin or the project creator and the secondary data review officer, the person that logs into Deep every day. Here we can do a lot for them because we can create a connector. We have connectors to relevant humanitarian sites, and you can also create your RSS feeds or atoms, etc. Traditionally, we always take Relief Web and we give it for granted, but basically you can create a connector for a specific country, specific dates, and data will be pulled into the Deep automatically. As we're going to see later, it's not a fully automated addition of those documents into the platform, but they get preloaded into our project. But basically here is where the project admin ends. So we have created our project in Deep, and we have created our connectors, and now we're done. Again, the profile or the user profile of the admin now is finished. That person does not necessarily need to be involved at all, for example, on the tagging. So not every user in Deep needs to master absolutely every tool or feature in it. I'm saying this because, yeah, it is a set of tools, and seen as a whole might be complex or might be seen as complex. I don't believe it is, but there is no need for mastering all those. Now we're going to get onto the daily life. So I'm an analyst, and then every day I need to first look at hunt for the data, collect it, tag it, and make it available for my colleagues. We have different ways of doing this. So the first of all is, okay, let's use the connectors. So we would go and just, so we're clear, we open the project. And then when we click on add a source, we first use connectors. So we're going to take connectors. As you see, this is a demo project and I'm not making a responsible use of the connectors because I have a lot on queue. But basically here, as you see, data is preloaded into our project Indeed. Metadata is already filled in. It's aligned with OCHA's and Relief Web's taxonomies. So we make sure that we all talk the same language. And basically data is preloaded into our project. However, we need to either ignore or add it to avoid noise and a lot of documents being added into our projects. Here we decide also the priority, for example, for tagging or the confidentiality. The confidentiality, as some of you might say, hey, we're pulling data from Relief Web. There's no way that it's confidential. You're right. But this menu is the same when you add documents from your local disk. So basically here with connectors, we would be adding documents into our project. Okay, we've done the first part. Now we can do something else that is, okay, we're going to go and check on the sites that we every day want to check, but we don't feel like establishing a connector. So to do that, what we're going to do, first of all, is to download the Chrome extension. It's going to help us with many things in deep. So for a full experience with the platform, please download the Chrome extension. We're going to now go and say, okay, I always go into the BBC because I'm doing some, analysis of politics somewhere. And you are going to see this. So we're going to take any article here. I'm not going to take this one because it's a dashboard, but basically we got it here, and we're going to make use of our deep extension. So when we use the deep extension, what deep is going to do, it's going to preload all the data as we saw. For example, it's going to preload the same as we saw before. The date, the source, the author, etc. It's going to be already preloaded. We click on save, and then data will be added into our project. That's the second way we have to add data into the deep. The third one is, well, manually. We could click here, add sources, and then we can either add them, connect with Drive or Dropbox, or add them from our local disk. Okay, so, well, Deep already has facilitated that process of data collection, and now we move into the processing of the data. All right, so we would say, okay, these are my documents that I need to process today. Traditionally, as I said, we would go and say, okay, we go into our documents, we see the document here, and traditionally what we would do, okay, I'm gonna open another document that is, well, that maybe has some visuals. Well, but basically we have an original view and a simplified view, okay? Traditionally, what we would do is, okay, we would select a piece of data. This is what we call tagging. So it is extremely rigorous, but also it sometimes can be time consuming, and not all teams can have a devoted person for this. So traditionally what we would do, we would select the text, we would click here, add an entry, and then we would say, okay, this text is talking about push factors for migrants or refugees, and it's also talking about coping mechanisms for food security. I'm completely making this up, so I'm clear. And then we go into the secondary tagging and say, okay, this is talking about Khartoum in Sudan. Well, I don't have Sudan in this project, but basically we would select the the location. We can say, okay, it's talking also about persons with disabilities, talking about IDPs, internally displaced people. So basically we can select and tag data according to our analysis framework. As I said, this is rigorous, we all agree, but it's time consuming. The second thing that we can do in Deep, that is the assisted tagging, would be to select the data, and Deep would suggest certain categories according to the text. It takes a few seconds, and then it will provide you with those tags. However, what we see as the main advantage of the new system is that we can now tag automatically. So we do not even need to select the text, but we would just click on here. And then Deep will recommend, in this document, we have 20 entries suggested by the Deep, and then we would either edit them. So sometimes it might be partially accurate. So we can, say, okay, all right, it's talking about food and health, but I do believe it's talking also about system disruption, and it didn't capture it as it should. So again, it's more of an initial step. It helps us, it saves time, but we still need the human in the loop that we call, and that ensures that this is a robust process. So basically, we add entries to our project, but they are automatically extracted and tagged. Once we have the data tagged, then we end up having, a repository of data, okay? So once we are done with our tagging, then we can explore or start the analysis process, or at least prepare the data. How can we do it? Let's think about for example, a project we have here. So we have 7,000 entries or pieces of data, and we can filter and say, okay, I'm going to filter data. I'm just going to use documents that are public. We can use, you can search for organizations that have published it, documents that have been published in a specific date, etc. And also we can establish filters for the entries themselves, that is for the pieces of data. As you see, we can either see the documents or we can see the entries. This is something you can do, explore data within the platform. If that suits your needs, that's fine. Sometimes we say, okay, I need a visualization of our data. So we can go and click here on dashboard. And then what we see, as I said before, is a dashboard that is generated automatically out of the data that we have tagged in our framework. So basically we can say, okay, this data is, correspond to a certain region, certain groups, sectors. Yeah, and we can play a bit with that. Also, this dashboard can be embedded anywhere. So you can click here and share, and then you will enable a public link that can be, basically used in any other web page. How is it useful? Well, remember that this dashboard does not give you access to the data itself. It's just metadata. So you can use this dashboard anywhere and you would not be compromising data. All right, so we see we can filter the data, we can have a look at the dashboard. All right, but what else we can do? Okay, sometimes you might say, hey, I want to do an export. So I want the data to be out of the platform. So we're going to click here on export. We would start a new export. And again, we can use as many filters as I said before. You can do an export for example, food security for a specific month, etc., etc. You can choose the format. The most typical ones are Excel and Word. You can decide many things or many variables into your export. And what would you obtain at the end is, okay, if you get the Word export, you would get this. You see here, we have an export with the categories of our framework, and you're going to say, okay, I want to see damages for livelihoods. And then you would click here. And as you see, you have metadata, you have both screenshots or text, and you have, basically the metadata. You have the location of your data, the people that have been affected, etc., etc., etc. That's one way of doing it. This is helpful, for example, for systematic reporting. So once a month, you take your export for health for a specific country or region. Then you screen it, and then you do it. This is the word export. If you feel more like working with quantitative data, you can also have it in Excel. However, we need to remember that the actual information we have, it's still text. Okay, we're working with text. You see the modified excerpt is our actual data. However, we have as many columns as different categories of our framework. So you could have some sort of a quantitative approach to this qualitative data. Then you can play with this, move it into other platforms or softwares, etc. Okay, so we've seen we can filter the data, we can explore it in a dashboard, we can do an export. But what if you want to do a analysis in deep? So now you can also do it. Before moving into that, I'm gonna very briefly mention the assessment registry. We can explore this with someone if you're interested, but if we move, for example, here, we have an assessment registry. The assessment registry has also its own dashboard, as you see here. So you can explore and say, okay, we have what has been assessed, where, but also how, for example, where people are using a secondary data review, or where people are using direct observation or focus group discussions, etc. And also there is an evaluation of the quality of the data or the assessments, okay? How is it done? Well, basically there is a process here to do the assessment registry in which you add the metadata, like you select the focus, methodology, and then you can score it. So you can also judge the quality of the data. And then, for example, do an information landscape report, as I mentioned before. I'm not going to go in depth into the assessment registry because I think it's a very niche tool, but in case anyone is curious, we're more than happy to explain it further. Okay, now we say, all right, we are happy with our export, we're happy with our data, but I want to do the analysis in deep. So we're gonna go into this menu, analysis, and then we can create it. You can set up a new analysis, and basically you can tell who's going to be the team lead, when is the start date of the information you want to pull into the analysis, and then select the different categories of your framework. Here, you're going to see many categories of my framework. So you say, okay, I'm going to do analysis on health. But if you create a different framework that is much simpler, those will be the pillars that show up in here. You can add as many as you want. And I have prepared something so you can have a look at it, okay? So here we're gonna see we have analysis on protection for a specific country. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna say, okay, I want the information for a specific month or project for protection, and then you would click here on analyze. What you're gonna see is this. As you see, okay, we have documents that are public, okay, so I do not want to show to everyone private or confidential documents, and protection. As you see, we have more than 3,000 documents here, pieces of data or entries. You can filter further and say, okay, I want this data, but to be focused on, let's say, on Khartoum. Okay, so you select Khartoum, and then, well, we have 400 entries. You can be as specific as you want. If the data is correctly tagged, this has endless possibilities for an analyst. As you might know, you can do the most granular and specific analysis. However, because I want to show you the NLP features, we're going to leave it as it is. So, okay, we're going to even remove the Khartoum one, and then we say, okay, we have 3,000 entries. How can I even start the analysis? Is too much, right? So what Deep help us with here is the auto cluster. So Deep is going to cluster our selected data into different, what we call stories or clusters of information. And then, it takes, I don't know, if I trigger it now, it might take 30 seconds or 40 seconds, but imagine like it's 3,000 pieces of information, categorized and clustered in a few seconds. So it's worth it, okay? Anyway, I have prepared the data. And you see here how it is how it is already clustered. So Deep, as you see here, gives us what it considers, like the stories. So Here we have sexual violence against women and girls in Khartoum and Darfur, and then it has already dropped in here all the pieces of data that are relevant for that. Then here it creates one that is humanitarian programs and refugee registration. Here, efforts on JVV. Again, the more specific your filters are on the left side, the more accurate stories you will get. Also, they will be shorter in the sense that it will not take 30 entries for your story, and they would be more accurate. So this is the topic clustering. However, we have not yet started the analysis. So now we need to go into each of those stories and then do the analysis. Here again, Deep is going to help us. So let's take, for example, this one, sexual violence against women and girls. And then, as you see, I mentioned it before. So the first thing Deep does is, okay, it identifies where our information is taking place. I think it makes sense that it's very focused in Khartoum, because as you see, yeah, this title is just indicative in the sense that, you know, it gives us an idea of what could be the title for this, but you don't need to stick to it, okay? But anyway, we have just clicked on here, and just for everyone to be aware of what I just did, you click here and we open this story analysis module. So for this column here, sexual violence against women and girls in Khartoum, we're going to click here and we get the map as we saw before. You will not take any relevant decision out of this, but at least you get an idea of where your data is taking place. And here there's something that is interesting, that is an automatic summary. It is just a summary, yes and no. And sorry for this. Why? Well, because if we think about what we've done before, we've selected, curated the selection or data collection. We have tagged our documents. We've done quality control. We have filtered the analysis. Then we've clustered our stories in these stories or columns. And then we've done a summary. So yes, somehow it is just a summary, but it comes with a lot of methodology behind it. So we can say that it has a bit more of an analytical component, this summary. It could be the most basic descriptive analysis maybe, but it has something, okay? However, we know that that's not always enough. I mean, that's usually not enough actually. So we want to go beyond that. We can do here again, we can use the NLP features or we cannot use them, in the sense that if we want to create these stories manually, we can just go click on this little arrow here. I'm going to do it here with less data, but basically here you can create your story, and then you could perfectly drop and you say, okay, this is going to talk about health and protection issues in health centers. And then you're gonna drop your data here, and you can do it manually and say, okay, this is not relevant because it's anecdotal. Or so I'm explaining the NLP features because they are the most attractive for many people, but you can also not use it. And you can also combine both or have a hybrid approach to this. That is, for example, you can manually add all the pieces of data into your analysis stories, but then go and use what we are using here and say, okay, I've done the data preparation, I've done the initial selection of pieces of text, but now I want the analysis to be automated. So back to this menu, we can, well, let's go for the manual way. Okay, we have here all our entries. We're going to click here, generate analysis. And if we go to the analysis module, we can have both views, how your text is going to look at the end and your text on the, and your editing menu on the left. Here we can, we can write and do our analysis as we prefer to, okay? This would be the manual way of doing it. However, we can automate this process. How we can automate it? Well, we can click here on these little brains, and then Deep will do an analysis, at least an initial analysis for us. So we click, or we said, okay, I want you to identify information gaps. I want you to have an analytical statement. And if we click here, what we'll find, and you're gonna see, is, okay, let's see how it looks like. Well, it gives us an analytical statement. It's usually under 50 words, and it has already some judgment. Okay, we said that the summary could be the most basic descriptive analysis. This could be interpretative somewhere around that. Then we have a summary that has less judgment, is more explanatory, like it's more descriptive. We have the main information gaps identified for this cluster of data. And then we have the evidence or the sources that we've used. Again, this is just the initial step. If we want, we can continue our analysis and complement it. So here is where I would say, okay, it's a good first step, but for example, all these sources, I just realized that they are not relevant. And why I'm doing this? Because now, as you see, when I removed those entries, Deep automatically changed the stats here. So you are always transparent on the process for analysis, and you're always transparent on what sources you're using or where does your information come from. So, well, but basically, if we can pull the data from our connectors, we can tag the data automatically. We can filter it, cluster the information, and then perform the analysis. We somehow could have very easily analyzed large amount of data in a few minutes. Very little time as compared to the traditional way of doing analysis. Here is where the analysis module finishes. However, as we said, we have now something that is the reporting module. So if you have your analysis here done, then you can say, all right, I'm going to include something into my report. If you click on this little button, include in report, then when you open your report for a specific analysis, we have it here, for example, and we say, okay, we are going to create a new report. You're going to see, I'm going to show first, well, it's very basic here because we have nothing. However, if we filled our analysis in, we're going to see something like this. So basically we have, okay, this is our wash analysis. The information that comes here comes directly from the analysis module. So this is literally what we wrote in the analysis module. And then we have, well, we can add tables, we can add some visuals. We can, for example, embed, as we saw before, we can embed, for example, the dashboard, but also any other APIs or any other components that we want to add. And also it allows us to include some mapping capacities and some, let's say, basic quantitative features or components or elements. Why? Because when it's all right to work with qualitative data, but we all know that reporting happens mixing both approaches. So here is the moment on which we can say, okay, I'm going to add some key metrics, or I'm going to add a chart. You can then update or upload a simple Excel files, for example, images, etc., and then you can have your reporting here. How is this useful? Well, for example, sometimes we are not sure if our partners or colleagues are going to have the most up-to-date report, or if the version they have is obsolete. So this is a good opportunity, or this is a good chance for some organizations to say, hey, this is the link that can be public or not, just for members of the project. And please, whenever you want to check on the status of a situation or a disaster or status of operations, anything that you do in Deep, just go to this link, and then you have, it is granted that is the most up-to-date information. So this is not something that is widely adopted by organizations. We all know how difficult it is to publish certain products without going through comms or making it offline for donors or partners, but it is a useful option for making sure that you have always the most up-to-date version of your report. And I'm gonna stop or finalize the demo here. I hope I was able to make as clear as possible what this platform does, and as you might understand, every of those features deserves like a full demo. I'm available for that in case you're interested on onboarding the platform. And again, if you decide to start using Deep, please contact us. We'll make that process much easier. Anyway, if you feel awkward by contacting us directly and you prefer to interact with the platform and and explore it first, we have plenty of resources. We have, as I said before, 2 courses on Kaya. One of them is basically to use and master all the features in the platform, but from an agnostic point of view, let's say, And then we have one on frameworks. It is focused mostly on what we consider, like the most widely adopted framework, but also it has a lot of components that can be applied if you decide to create a framework yourself or you work on other areas of analysis. We have plenty of training videos in our YouTube channel and in the Deep web page that we recently launched. We have the Learning Hub on which you can find those materials and what we call the trainers package. The trainers package, well, it's not just for trainers, despite the title, but it was requested by the partners because sometimes you want to train people on the Deep. We are available for that, but in case you want to instruct your team, there is a comprehensive program in case you want to have a go at it. And yeah, I'm gonna stop the presentation now. I hope it wasn't too dry. I know I've been talking for more than an hour now, but yeah, it's let's say it's a comprehensive platform, and yeah, there are plenty of features that deserve at least a few minutes each. I don't know if I left something behind. I think we should be all right, but I'm sure that there are some questions now. So I don't know if my colleagues have already curated some questions, or otherwise we can start from the very beginning on the answers, on the questions. Okay, so I'm going to start from the very first one, and here is when I might need my colleagues' help, because it's something that I usually say at the beginning of the demo. I am not a technical person. I would say, the most advanced of the Deep users, but I am not technical at all. But that's why some of my colleagues are with us today. I think this question might not be replied by us as Deep, but what is the guidance by the UN on the use of LLMs in analysis? I am afraid that this is something that might be better answered by some colleagues from the UN. I don't know if someone is attending here today that could answer that question. However, just for everyone to know, like every step we take or every progress we make on Deep is consulted, verified, and checked with the Deep technical advisory group that is composed by technical experts from all the organizations part of our governance board, and it is curated. So nothing on the Deep happens without our partners knowing, and considering that there are several UN partners, we definitely align with it. However, I do not know, I cannot reply to that answer. I don't know if any of my colleagues can answer that. If you can, please.
Yeah, Pepe, very quickly, and I think the person that asked the question just left. But yeah, just to say that as you mentioned, anytime that we are kind of launching new models or testing them, we are always kind of also being respectful of the approach to responsible AI, which is basically do no harm, safety and security, right to privacy and data protection, responsibility and accountability. I do know that there was some guidance back in 2022 from UN on the use of ethical AI, but I was looking during the session for it, and the link seems to be down at the moment. But I agree with you. I think it's more a question from the UN, but just to mention, or echo what you mentioned, we have a technical advisory group with some members from the UN, and anytime that we are kind of launching new NLP features, we have kind of these different sessions, and we are also kind of discussing with them what are kind of the new improvements that we may need to have in the platform. But over to you, Pepe, again. But I think it's probably a question from people on the UN. Thanks.
Thanks, Najid. And I see that you have already replied to the second one. That is the level of complexity. Just a side note to this, like deep can be as complex as you want or as simple as you want. I mean, with a, like there is a threshold, a minimal threshold, but again, you do not need to use all its features and you do not need to work on deep and create everything from scratch. The whole idea behind deep is to share knowledge, to avoid duplication. So how can we achieve that? Well, collaborating. Like the more we use collaborative projects, the more we share data, the more scalable it will be. Okay. In any case, yes, it requires at least, if you're going to create the project yourself, like certain level of like data management capacities. So the questions that were shared in the chat have already been replied. I don't know if any of the people still in the session have any further questions? Well, it seems that there are no further questions. So, well, then what I'm gonna say is, well, thank you everyone for attending the session. We will share the slides used today, and we'll be happy to talk, to help you on your onboarding and to discuss any concerns or questions, thoughts that you might have around the deep. Again, thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day and see you soon.